Mochi Mochi, how are you all doing? Today I have more adventures in Japan to share with you. As you may recall from watching my last videos, I visited there this past April. If you want to see the first part of the series, please click here. Or, alternatively, you can watch the quick recap that I will play on screen right now. So, as you can see, my family and we are now about to reach our second stop in our Hokkaido pilgrimage, Otaru. This is also the place where the story of Golden Kamuy begins, Golden Kamuy being my favorite franchise, as I mentioned in the last video. It is sort of poetic, we went from the end directly to the beginning. Akodate, that with us left, is where the manga ends. So, for starters, let me tell you a bit about Otaru. Otaru is a small harbor city northwest of Sapporo. Its Ainu original name, Otarunai, means river flowing through sand. Somewhere during the late Edo period, the village was established by people who migrated to the area in search of herring. From then onwards, the area was included in a shipping route called Kitamaebune, who made a bridge between Osaka and northern Japan. While all sorts of daily commodities were brought into Otaru, the village would export seafood to Honshu. In 1871, Meiji era, the government opened a colonization office in Sapporo, which established Otaru as the most important port for the development of Hokkaido. Several financial institutions moved to the area, leading to increasing prosperity. Soon after, a railway line was built between Sapporo and Otaru, and operations began in November 1880. Designed by American engineer Joseph Crawford, this line was called the Oronai Line, and it was the first railway built in Hokkaido. At first, it was used to transport marine products and coal, but after 1906, it also served as a means of transportation for people for almost a century. Oronai closed in 1985 during the Showa period. A 1.6-kilometer section of this line, known as the Tamiya Railway, is now preserved in Otaru and open to visitors. The tracks, circuit breakers, and other elements are still intact, so you can walk alongside it and picture how it looked back then. I don't know if this is the first time you have heard of Otaru, but if not, you might associate the city with its iconic canal. The Otaru Canal, 40 meters wide, 1,314 meters long, is the city's most famous feature, as it gives the place a sort of Venetian look. But this canal wasn't always there. In actuality, its existence only dates back to 1914. You see, up until a certain point in time, barges were used to unload cargo from the large ships that would dock at the port. However, as the amount of cargo kept increasing, barge traffic congestion became a problem. That's why, in order to facilitate the process of unloading and loading, the Japanese decided to create an artificial island. That way, unloading operations would be carried out around this new piece of land. The water surface left between the original wharf and the artificial island came to be known as the Otaru Cannal. In other words, the Otaru Cannal is a human-made waterway. The artificial island took 9 years to craft, but it solved the traffic problem. After its completion in 1923, the canal contributed to Otaru's prosperity for a while. Large vessels would unload their goods onto smaller ships, which would in turn transport said goods to warehouses along the canal. However, after the war, modern dock facilities started being built at Otaru Port, thus rendering the canal obsolete. As sludge and garbage began to pile up, the government made plans to reclaim the canal and build a 3-lane road in its place. However, the people from the city didn't want that. They wanted to preserve this waterway and turn it into a symbol of Otaru. So they launched a movement which became known as the Otaru Canal Preservation Movement. Needless to say, they won, because as you will see if you ever go there, the canal stands proud. The warehouses around it were also transformed into museums, shops, and restaurants. So, as you can see, the fishing industry, especially when it comes to herring, played a major role in the history of Otaru in the early days. The fish wasn't just for human consumption. In fact, the majority was used to make fertilizers instead. However, in the 1950s, the herring stock started to suffer a significant decline, leading to the collapse of the industry. Because of this, many crafters who used it to make glass buoys to keep fishing nets afloat shifted to producing refined glassware. This is one of the reasons why Otaru is also very well known for its glasswork. The other reason is that electrification was slow to arrive in Otaru, so the city's residents were still using glass oil lamps even after the turn of the century. Therefore, the glass industry was more of a necessity there than in other places. Nowadays, the reputation of Otaru's glass attracts many tourists. Besides buying glassware at many shops in the city, there are also places where you can make your own cups, bowls, or vases. The city also has a stained glass museum and a museum dedicated to Venetian art. A bit out there, I know, but there was this guy, Kitaishi, a local glass producer, that apparently really liked Venice. Still on famous museums, there is one dedicated to money and banks, another dedicated to music boxes, yet another displaying the works of the novelists and poets associated with Otaru, and the City Museum, which is divided into two sections, one on history and the other on railways. I actually really wanted to see the trains that are on display at this last museum because, you guessed it, Noda, the author of Golden Kamuy, visited it during his research. So the train that appears in the final arc is modeled after the steam locomotive Shizuka-go, and the interiors are similar to those of the I-1 train. Sadly, we didn't have the time, so I never got to see those trains in person. Speaking of not having time, there's another place I would have liked to stop by, Mount Tengu, a mountain that towers over the city of Otaru. The view the summit offers, it is said to be one of Hokkaido's three great night views. Now, is this why I wanted to go there? No. While I'm sure the view is beautiful, what actually piqued my interest is that at the top of this mountain there is a ski museum. And inside this museum there is an exhibit called Tengu no Yakata, which displays around 700 Tengu masks collected from all over Japan. And you know me. Actually, you don't, but never mind. I love mythology. I even chose Japanese folklore as a theme for a project of mine. So obviously, a place like this is right up my alley. But again, there's no time to visit everything. As for what else you can see in Otaru, there is a lot. I can't cover it all without boring you, I fear. So now with this introduction out of the way, allow me to go back to me and my family so you know what we actually visited. When we reached Otaru, it was almost 4 in the afternoon, so we headed straight to Old Aoyama Villa, our must-see destination. Part of episode 2 of the live-action Golden Kamuy series and of Prisoners in Hokkaido takes place in this villa. We arrived there with just 1 hour to spare, really cutting it close. The Old Aoyama Villa stands as a symbol of a time when airy fishing was in its prime. The record of gains brought by a season's first haul registered in the Taisho era is of 560,000 tons, which would be worth over 168 billion yen today. With numbers such as these, it comes as no surprise that those who controlled the herring market were very, very wealthy. One such family was the Aoyama family, one of the 3 leading herring fishing tycoons. The other 2 families were the Ibaraki and the Shiratori. During the Taisho era, the Aoyama controlled a total of 10.5 to of fishing operations, with a to being a working unit with 25 to 100 fishermen. Each to could catch up to 600,000 fish with their nets in a single night, so you can make the math for yourself. You will see how it starts to add up. In 1913 alone, the Aoyama family made a fortune of 2.5 billion yen by today's standards from the herring caught in their fishing grounds. Back then, wealthy fishermen would build large herring mansions, called nishin-goten, to process the fish and to serve as a residence for themselves and their employees. The Aoyama's nishin-goten was nothing short of impressive, as you can imagine, and for this reason, it was preserved and moved to the Historic Village Open Air Museum in Sapporo. Don't forget this, it will be important later. The Aoyama left behind more than just a palatial herring mansion dot. Aoyama Masae, Masakishi's daughter, was just 17 years old when she visited the lavish mansion of the Onma family in Sakata. She returned with a desire for the Aoyama family to have a beautiful villa. So, in 1917, Masakishi began to turn the project into a reality, something that was only possible because of all the money that the Aoyama family had built over 2 generations. Masae was, of course, involved in every step of the way, offering guidance. Both Masakishi and Masae were artistically inclined, with a love for beauty. They enjoyed calligraphy, sho, and making Japanese paintings, nihongo. They wanted the villa to be completely different from the Ering mansion, which was grand but practical. Masakishi hired the chief imperial carpenter, Nenosuke Saito, who, alongside 40 carpenters, plasterers, and joiners, worked on the villa for 6 years. The whole thing cost about 310,000 yen, which might not seem like a lot, but it was back then. The material that was used the most during construction was keiyaki, Selkova wood, which was imported from Sakata, the place where, remember, there was that mansion Masai fell in love with. Besides Selkova wood, the project also demanded Japanese cedar for the ceiling, and rosewood, blackwood, Bombay blackwood, and bamboo for the inside. The roofs of Aoyama Villa are tilled, which is rare in Hokkaido because of all the snow. This type of roofs is called kawara, and they are very typically Japanese. For instance, you can find a lot of these in Kyoto. The floors and pillars are all covered with lacquer, and the walls are plastered by hand with shikui, a Japanese material made from a mixture of hydrated lime and calcium carbonate found in eggshells. Moreover, the corridor is one continuous piece. There are no joints from one end to the other. When you step on it, it makes a sound similar to a nightingale's chirp. For that reason, these floors are called nightingale floors, uguizu bari. You might think it's strange that anyone would want the ground they're standing on to chirp, but it makes sense when you think about the safety benefits, like how much easier it will be to spot intruders. And of course, no Japanese house is complete without its sliding doors, which are called fusama. Aoyama Villa's doors feature paintings and calligraphy by the master artist Gyokudo Kawai and 10 of his disciples. They stayed with Masakishi for about a month, working on the pieces. The house is surrounded by a courtyard, Karen Sui style, most commonly known as a Zen garden, a composition of stones, sand, and pine trees. The surrounding gardens, they change depending on the season. Cherry blossoms in spring, hydrangeas and lilies in summer, and Japanese lilies in fall. There are also peonies, blooming from May to June. Of course, it can happen that you might fail to catch any of these, which is what happened to us. Photos are not allowed inside, by the way, so everything I have been showing you was taken outside in the garden or in the waiting room. But the inside of the house is really pretty too, as you can imagine. There is a room that depicts the cycle of life of peonies, from when they are buds until they die, and in another room, the 8 immortals, Baishian of Chinese mythology, can be seen spread over 13 panels. Oh, and one last thing, the villa has a restaurant where you can ask for the Nishin soba, which is a soba dish topped with herring. So if you are to visit this mansion at around lunchtime, which we didn't sadly, there is no other food that fits the occasion better. After leaving the villa, we headed to Otaru Niikuraya, a sweet shop, because we were a bit hungry after having an on-the-road lunch. Because of its history of commercial prosperity, Otaru is a great place to find traditional Japanese sweets, with its plenty shops that specialize in confectionery. I chose this place specifically because I knew I could find what I wanted there: soy sauce covered dango, called mitarashi dango. The same the characters Sugimoto and Tsurumi share at a certain point in the story, those tense moments before it all goes down. Dango are rice flour balls that are often served on a skewer. The Niikuraya shop offers several types of dango, from the most famous three-colored one, Anami dango, to the covered in black sesame, white bean paste, adzuki bean paste, or matcha bean paste. My brother wanted to try the Anami, but sadly, it was already sold out, so he got some candy instead. Besides the Mitarashi dango, which was my goal, I also got one of those covered in black sesame, just for the sake of adding some variety. It turns out that the mitarashi are the better option though. They are a bit too sweet for my taste, but they are good nevertheless. I also bought a sakura mochi to eat the following day because I just had to. They look so elegant wrapped in leaves. I entertained the idea of also buying these ones, mochi whose surface resembles the skin of a seal. They are just too cute. But alas, we had too many sweets already. That night and the following night, we were guests in the home of a Japanese couple. It was a new experience for us. The last time we were in Japan, we stayed one night at a ryokan, a traditional Japanese inn, and spent a few days at a friend's house in Yokohama. However, the ryokan environment is not as casual, and our friend is fluent in English, as she has family in America, so communication was easy. This couple, on the other hand, didn't speak English or Portuguese, which presented the perfect opportunity for me. They had a speech to text translation device, so they were prepared to receive us. However, I still made an effort to overcome my shyness and communicate in the normal way. The lady, she was incredibly helpful. I couldn't complete a single sentence without her instantly correcting my speech. Oh, if I had stayed there for a few weeks, how my Japanese would have improved. Her correcting me all the time wasn't just helpful, but also sort of flattering in a way. Do you get it? Because, it implies that she thinks I'm worth teaching, right? That I know enough that I can understand why I'm being corrected. By answering me with chichi when I just use nana in a sentence, she is basically assuming I know certain numbers have more than one pronunciation. By correcting my particles, she is assuming I know what particles are. So yeah, I did find it more flattering than if she had just brushed it off. And she was good at judging my skills, on top of that. Sometimes she would talk to me, answer me, and make me questions. Other times she wouldn't bother and would go straight to using the translation device. For example, when she wanted to tell me that we would have bread with raisins for breakfast the next morning, she spoke directly to her device without attempting to talk to me first. This was probably because she rightly assumed that I wouldn't know the Japanese word for raisins. I know ringo, suika, momo, but not raisins. I went to look it up afterwards, and turns out that their most used term for raisins is borrowed from English, raisin. But I do admit, if she had said something like, tomorrow for breakfast there will be bread with raisin, is that okay? I would have been super lost. Japan Greece truly is a language in its own right. The thing with borrowed words is that you have to recognize they are borrowed words first. Sometimes it's very easy to mistake them for Japanese words that aren't in your vocabulary yet. Speech doesn't come in katakana or hiragana after all. In any case, staying with the couple was a very enriching experience, especially for me. But the rest of my family liked it too. I mean, how could we not? They had cats. You don't have cats wandering around in a hotel. Cats make everything better just by existing. I will never not get excited when visiting a place that has cats. We dropped our things in our rooms, then left for a stroll along the canal. Otaru is currently suffering from over-tourism, seeing as it is the second most visited city in Hokkaido after Sapporo, but being a lot smaller than the latter. Its high popularity is partially due to some famous movies and TV dramas having scenes set there, such as an old movie from the 90s, Love Letter, the recent drama released last year, Beyond Goodbye, The Silence of the Sea and My Shine Shine, also from 2024, First Love, among others. However, most people visit during the winter, namely when the Otaru Snow Light Pet Festival, Otaru Yuki Akara no Michi, is happening in February. During the festival, the city becomes full of lights and gets decorated with small snow statues. Besides the official lights of the event, the locals also contribute with their own lanterns, which they display in front of their houses and shops. Since we went in April, the roads were all very peaceful. There were no crowds or lines anywhere, and in the villa we were the only visiting at that hour, so we had the entire place all to ourselves. It was the same all over Hokkaido, plenty of space everywhere, and when it wasn't raining, the weather was actually quite nice. That or my heavy blanket of a coat was really that good. We strolled along the canal, admiring the warehouses and the gaslights, before picking a restaurant to have dinner at. While we were pacing around, we found this statue of a dog. I later found out this is a memorial to Bunko, which was the mascot of the Otaru Fire Brigade department between the years of 1914 and 1938. When still a puppy, he was saved from the burned down ruins of a property and cared for by a fireman. That's when his life as a mascot began. We ended up having dinner at the Takinami restaurant. My father and I ate a shirabeshi courtyard, which is a milk and cream soup with seafood from Otaru. It had shrimp, fish cake, soft white fish, and clams. It was quite good, and I'm saying this as a person who doesn't like fish. I like seafood, but not fish. And even I thought the soup was tasty. My mother, she ate this dish. I have no clue what kind of specimen this is. I thought about asking the staff, but it was already nighttime, so I didn't feel particularly talkative. If any of you recognize what kind of fish this is, feel free to tell me in the comments below. When we stood up to leave the restaurant, that's when the cook left the kitchen and asked where we were from. They probably had been trying to guess all the time we were eating. Were we Russian? But we didn't look Russian. We were so tiny, like sardines. We exchanged a few words. Turns out that they had never had any Portuguese people in their restaurant before. We were the first. Look at us, being the face of our country and bringing our flag to new places. And our blood, apparently. I got my face all bitten by mosquitoes that night. I really can't be near any body of still water. No matter the season or how many clothes I have on me, I always end up with nasty bites. I'm like a protagonist of a young adult novel, my blood bringing all the vampires to the yard. Except these vampires are tiny and ugly and their bites sting. I had already predicted that I was going to be bitten in Otaru, so I had come prepared with all sorts of creams. All in all, I'm glad the bites weren't alarming. I can get really bad reactions if I get one bite too many. One trip I made to Italy almost got ruined because of that. But I digress. The next morning, we had a Western-style breakfast at the Yasuda's house, consisting of bread with raisins, butter, and jam. Most of us drank coffee or coffee with milk, but my brother got orange juice instead. We had a company of Yuki and Sakura, the cats. Yuki is the most adventurous one, while Sakura is more reserved. There is also a third cat, but she was nowhere to be seen. The couple also has a dog, a Shiba Inu, I would guess, given its size and overall appearance. It could be an Akita, but those are larger, so I think it is more likely to be a Shiba. The dog cannot be touched and is not allowed to walk around us because he might bite and be aggressive. He starts barking and growling when attention is given to the cats, for he gets jealous easily. Even though they are different breeds, the Yasuda's dog reminded me of Ryu from Golden Kamuy. Ryu is a Hokkaido dog tot, an Ainu Ken. We asked the couple if there was a place we could wash our clothes, and they kindly offered their washing machine. The lady gave me a detailed explanation on how to use it, and I got maybe half of it. So when she asked me if I had understood her, I obviously answered with wakata. Look at me integrating so well into Japanese culture. And 10 minutes later, I had to go get her again because I had no idea where to put the detergent. So much for having understood. We dedicated the next day to Sapporo, which is just a short road trip away from Otaru. Sapporo is the biggest city in Hokkaido and the 5th most populous in Japan. Its Ainu name is Sapporo Pet, which means dry great river, since Sapporo lies within the alluvial fan of the Toyoire River. As with the other Hokkaido regions, Sapporo was once a plain inhabited by the Ainu. During the Edo period, the Matsumae clan built some trading posts in the area, but these were scarce. It was just in 1866 that things began to change, and some early settlers started to establish a village there. 2 years later, Sapporo was born. This was the year when the new Meiji government decided to change the administrative center of Hokkaido from Akodate to the Ishikari Plain, which is the Sapporo region. While Hokkaido is dominated by mountains, the Ishikari Plain presents an exception, for it provides an abundance of flat, well-drained land. This is why the Japanese chose it as the new capital. Securing this land was the next logical step if they wanted to continue expanding, and so they did. The city is made up of blocks because it was built on a grid layout. Construction began around Odori Park, which remains the heart of Sapporo to this day. The park hosts a variety of events and festivals throughout the year, the most famous of which is the annual Sapporo Snow Festival, held in February. This event attracts over 2 million tourists each year. Alongside the lights, which are on all winter long, people visiting Sapporo at this time can also enjoy elaborate snow and ice statues. Even if you have never heard of this event, you might have seen photos of some of these statues online, so now you know where to find them. Of course, the statues do not make themselves. They are the result of the combined efforts of the citizens and the Japanese army. In May, the Sapporo Lilac Festival offers visitors the chance to enjoy flowers, wine, and live music. Then, in June, two festivals take place: the Yosakoi Soren Festival and the Hokkaido Shrine Festival. The former is based on a traditional Japanese song called Soren Bushi and features dancing competitions, while the latter features a parade of portable shrines. As for the Summer Festival, it consists of a number of fairs, including one only dedicated to beer, where people can enjoy drinks from Japan's leading brewers, as well as from other parts of the world. There is also a parade of women dressed as courtesans from the Edo period, which takes place at Suzukinu, Sapporo's entertainment district. Furthermore, night sales are held at the Tanuki Koji Street, which is, of course, decorated for the occasion. Tanuki Koji is one of Hokkaido's oldest shopping streets. Dating back to 1873, it spans around 900 meters and contains approximately 200 shops. The summer festival ends with the Bonodori, where people celebrate with dances and drum performances. Finally, there is also the Sapporo Autumn Festival in September and a Christmas market in December, similar to those in Germany. We didn't attend any of these festivals because my family and I visited Hokkaido in April, but I still wanted to let you know that they exist. In any case, Sapporo grew in influence over time, eventually replacing Otaru as Hokkaido's commercial and business hotspot after the Second World War. Two airports were built in the area: Okadame Airport, which offers regional flights within Hokkaido and Tohoku, and New Shitose Airport, a larger international airport located in the city of Shitose, 50 kilometers away. In 1972, Sapporo hosted the Winter Olympics. These were the first Winter Olympics held in Asia. It is said that by 2030, the Hokkaido Shinkansen line, which, as you know, connects Honshu and Hakodate, will expand to also include Sapporo, which would then become the new terminal stop. Besides Odori Park, Sapporo is home to many other parks, such as the Moerenuma Park, which contains a huge pyramid structure, the Nakajima Park, the Maruyama Park, where you can find the famous Hokkaido Jingu Shrine, and the Shiroi Koibitu Park, which is famous for its chocolate and its Western-style buildings. Personally, I find this one quite lovely. It's the one I would have chosen to visit if I had had more time. Another interesting one is the park that surrounds the Sapporo Art Museum, where you can find outdoor sculptures. Speaking of Western style buildings, the former Hokkaido government office is quite impressive, and the clock tower, Tokidai, is one of Sapporo's landmarks. So they're probably worth checking out, especially since they are not far from Sapporo Station. Then, depending on how interested you are in the city's history, you might want to visit Hokkaido University. It has a huge, beautiful campus and a museum where you can learn more about the place. There is also another campus in Akodate, but Sapporo's is the more impressive of the two. At its foundation in 1876, the university was called Sapporo Agricultural College, but it has had many names since then. Important figures from the USA were invited to help found and develop this institution, among them Dr. William S. Clark, who became famous for the quote, "Boys, be ambitious," which became the university's motto. You can find a statue of Dr. Clark in the Itsushigaoka Observatory, but be aware that there is an entry fee. This is something that blindsides many people. On the bright side, you also get access to a museum about Sapporo Snow Festival. There are also winter activities if you happen to visit during the snowy season, as well as places to get something to eat. And if you're after panoramic views, you can go up the Sapporo TV Tower, which stands in the middle of Odori Park at a height of around 90 meters, or you can head to Mount Moya, which offers a great view of the city from above. There are many other places I didn't mention. After all, Sapporo is a big city, especially when it comes to museums. There are plenty. A history and archaeology museum, an Olympics museum, a dairy farming museum, to name a few. The places we visited were the Sapporo Historical Open Air Museum and the Sapporo Beer Museum. The Sapporo Historical Open Air Museum opened in 1983, and it features a total of 52 buildings with historical significance that were relocated here and restored. These buildings represent the history of Akodate from 1968 to the 1920s. The village is divided in four sections: the town, the fishing village, the farm village, and the mountain village. Inside the buildings, you can find fully furnished divisions, and objects, tools, pieces of clothing, equipment, etc. help you understand how people lived back then and how industries operated. Some exhibits even contain mannequins. Now, here's the catch: the majority of the labels are in Japanese. Only the bare essential is translated to English. This is very common in Hokkaido, and you can consider yourself lucky if there are any translations at all, because some other places don't even have that. You are also given a pamphlet explaining what each of the buildings is and the map. One thing you need to be aware of is that you have to take off your shoes before entering the buildings. This is common in Japan, of course, but here you need to do it dozens of times. So some playing is necessary if you want to save time. So that's why I bought these boots. They were less than 30 euros, so not very expensive, and might have been one of the best purchases I've made. Not only they are super comfortable and warm, but I can take them off without having to sit down. And when I want to put them on, I can just hop into them. I had no boots for cold weather, because I never had that necessity, but these are great. I can wear them where I live, because even the winters are too hot, but I'm planning to move north, so I will definitely need them again in the future. They aren't waterproof, but that's basically the only negative thing about them. But anyway, all of this to say that visiting Japan means taking your shoes off a lot, so bear that in mind. The day we visited the village, it was raining and the wind was blowing strongly. Not the best day for outdoor activities, but all things considered, it could have been worse. because of the inclement weather, thought there were no horse-drawn streetcars in circulation. Yes, the village has a horse-drawn streetcar that goes up and down the main street. In the winter, during weekends, national holidays, and the Sapporo Snow Festival, the streetcar gets replaced by a sleigh. Because of this, we thought the village would be much bigger than it actually is, and were worried about how long it would take to travel between buildings. But everything is very well arranged, and the buildings are all close together. When we entered the main building, which is a recreation of the Sapporo station of 98, we were greeted by a golden Kamuy exhibit. You see, almost all the buildings that are in this village were used as settings by Satoru Noda when he created his manga. So when you look through the pages, you can find in the background not only the outside of these buildings, but the insides as well. They even tell you at the entrance what buildings appeared in the manga, and in which volume. Doing a side-by-side comparison between the real-life scenarios and their manga anime equivalents would take way too much time, and this video is already shaping up to be the longest of the series so far, so I will only cover some of these, the ones that I find more emblematic. But I will leave two links in the description, two videos of Japanese people who did the whole side-by-side comparison thing for pretty much all the places in the village. To get the full picture, be sure to watch both videos. If you're a Golden Kamuy fan, that is, of course. The Golden Kamuy exhibition also contained the sled that was used in the shooting of a live-action movie, which was partially filmed in this village, as well as the autographs of the actors and actresses who are part of the cast. Left to right, top to bottom, Sugimoto, Azirba, Ogata, Shiraishi, Tsukishima, Tsurumi, Ijikata, Tanigaki, Ushiyama, Nakakura, Kiroranke, Inkarmat, Enaga, Suzukawa. I apologize if I got any of them wrong. If so, don't forget to correct me in the comments. Names are one of the hardest things to translate from Japanese because there is no context. You have to know how to read the kanji. Not to mention that there are different readings for almost every kanji, so I used Google Translate, but we know how amazing Google Translate is. Actually, this reminds me of a funny story. In one of the hotels we stayed in, I was having trouble with the AC, so I called the staff for help. They tried to tell me something through a speech-to-text translation device, but the translation was complete nonsense. Then they tried to translate to Portuguese and it got even worse. Now the fan at it and closed. I was ready to lock in and ask them to speak to me in Japanese. Then the AC started working. Seems some things do solve themselves. And speaking of Japanese adventures, it was at the Sapporo Historical Village that I experienced firsthand how inconvenient it is that the Japanese language is so dependent on context. I wasn't sure whether I was allowed to take photos of the Golden Kamuy exhibition. There weren't any signs prohibiting it, but the Japanese often have permission signs too. So, and in this case, there were no signs at all. So I thought, might as well ask just to be sure. Photo ii desu ka? I asked. I could have used the word shashin, but I think photo is one of those words that the Japanese are familiar with and might even use themselves. I might be wrong, but that wasn't the problem anyway. The problem was that the staff thought I was asking if he could take our photo. And we went along with it because it would have been too embarrassing to clear up the misunderstanding at that point. But yeah, you should be careful with those very simple sentences that can be taken in many different ways. But then the longer you make your sentences, the more likely you are to mess up or sound very unnatural, so we left the Golden Kamuy area behind and started exploring the buildings. This is a reconstruction of the Hokkaido Development Commission main Sapporo office from 1973. The original burned down in 1979. This is the Urukawa Subprefectural Government Building. Satoru Noda used it as a model for the Sapporo World Hotel, where Sugimoto, Azirpe, Shiraishi, and Kiroranki spent the night after reaching Sapporo on their journey together. The hotel is run by a beautiful woman named Enaga, who has more to her than meets the eye. Inside the Urukawa building, a horse carriage and a rickshaw are preserved. The rickshaw had a function equivalent to the taxis of today, and they were used in Akodate, Sapporo, and Otaru from the middle of the Meiji period onwards. The one in exhibition was used for commercial purposes by a store owner called Saijo Buhei. Do you remember when I talked about the Temiya line, the railway line that was built between Sapporo and Otaru? This is the residence of its station master, the person who was in charge of the Otaru station. It was built in 1884 and moved here. This building was the residence of the late Naritoyo Fukishi, a pioneer of Japanese meteorological observation. Inside, you can see some instruments like a theodolite used to measure angles and a trigonometry book. This place was used as the model for Ijikate's group hideout, and the room gave us dreams like Ijikate relaxing on this chair or Hogata trying to stay warm. We are now approaching a body of water meant to represent the sea. It's the fishing village. Here you can find the Chushi's storehouse, which was used to store fish, processed marine products, and fishing tools. And do you remember the Aoyama family? The ones that had that beautiful villa we visited earlier? The facilities here are their empire. This is where the fishermen would stay, sleep, and eat during the herring fishing season. And there were also storage houses for nets, tools, rice, and boats. The main house, which was used to accommodate the fishermen, makes a lot of appearances in the Golden Kamuy story, specifically during the Kazuo enemy arc. Sugimoto, Azirpa, and Shiraishi head to the coast hoping to find a serial killer named Kazuo enemy. It's herring season, so lots of people are temporarily working there for one of the big families that control the fishing market, and enemy is hiding among them. Shiraishi, the only one who knows the face of the criminal, gets separated from the group, and Azirpa and Sugimoto end up coincidentally meeting the killer, without knowing who he really is. Some famous scenes that happen here include Emi suffocating a fisherman who had stayed behind to rest from a cold, and the killer sharing a meal of white rice, which was rare back then, with Sugimoto and Azirpa. Another room in this building serves as the setting for a flashback episode from Ogata's life. Likewise, in another flashback, you can see the kitchen where Ogata's mother used to cook, which is modeled after the kitchen of the Akiyama family house. In a Japanese kitchen, you could find tools such as iron pots, kettles, and water jugs, as well as a kamado hearth. The typical meal consisted of miso soup and rice, accompanied by fish and pickles or vegetables boiled in soy sauce. It was only at the end of the 19th century that Western-style food, red meat, dairy products, tomato, cabbage, and so on started being introduced in Japan, thanks to campaigns by the Kaitaku government. And with those foods, Western kitchen tools also started to make an appearance in the Japanese homes. Frying pans, large dishes, spoons, etc. We visited some more interesting buildings, such as the Fujiwara cart and slate factory, the Watanabe and Takioka's groceries, and the Oishi sweet shop. The Fujiwara cart and slate factory was built in 93 at Moseushi by an immigrant from the Hyogo prefecture. It survived for 3 generations, and this current building you are seeing is a reconstruction. Inside, there are labels explaining how this industry worked. For making the sleigh runners, for example, which are those parts of the sleigh that touch the ground and allow the sleigh to slip through the ice, the workers would first soften the wood using steam, then bend it and shape it with lathe, and strung it until dry. Pieces will then be matched in pairs according to their curvatures. The Watanabe grocery store used to be located in Nakatombetsu, which used to be a very active town in the 1890s. These were the days of the gold rush, when people flocked to Hokkaido to pan for gold. In 1916, the railway reached the town, establishing it as one of Hokkaido's hubs. The Watanabe grocery store had two floors: the ground floor, where business was conducted, and the upper floor, where the goods were stored. At the back of the building, there used to be a storehouse and the owner's residence. The Takioka's is another grocery store from around the same time, founded by a family of prestige that had left Awaji Shima to establish themselves in Shizunai, Hidaka district. The store opened in 1882, and the bigger version of it, the one you can see right now, was built in 1898. Here you could find items such as clothes, cereals, sake, medicine, kerosene, and so much more. The Oishi sweet shop was founded by Taizo Oishi, a confectioner who left Sapporo to start a new life in Obihiru. He ran the shop from 1925 to 1955. Oishi is a fitting name for a sweet maker. I can help but say what's on everyone's mind. Next to the shop, there is a small sweets factory, and you can go inside. Then we finally got to see one of the buildings I was more excited about, Yamamoto's barber shop. The shop is from the Taisho era, 1920s, and it moved around several times before ending up here. So this is one of those buildings that isn't a reconstruction but original. This barber shop appears in Golden Kamuy in an OVA called The Baratu Bodyguards. Despite being in an OVA, the scene in which Ogata visits the barber shop and then threatens and stabs a police chief in the shin with a pair of scissors has become relatively famous. One of the last buildings we saw before rushing to get lunch, since it was late afternoon and we were worried the restaurant would close, was the police box at Minami Ishizo. It was in use until 1970 and it used to be located by the Soze Riverside here in Sapporo. My parents and I asked for the menu set, which looked like this: miso soup, pickles, mini pancakes with sauce, fish cake skewers, also glazed in soy sauce, and inside this bowl there was rice with fish. I just want to turn your attention to this great food right here. This is called a konyaku, which means devil's tongue, a red name. This jelly is made from the Amorphophilus konjac plant, which is native to Southeast Asia. This was my first time trying konyaku. It has a bland taste and an interesting texture. I'm not using bland as an insult, by the way. I genuinely like bland food. It's something people don't seem to appreciate enough, in my opinion. I just found out that apparently konjac fruit jelly is banned in the European Union for being a shocking hazard, which might explain why I never even knew it was a thing. And like, how is this a greater shocking hazard than prosciutto, for example? That thing is not like regular M. You chew and it's never ready to go down. Prosciutto. Anyway, I also asked for a side of cheese potato balls. You can't go wrong with cheese potato balls. And my brother asked for a regular ramen. When we went to get our meal, my father asked the service girl if we could have coffee after our meal, in English. I could have easily translated this to Japanese, but when my father asked the girl if she had understood, she replied, "Wakata." She seemed confident too. Then she proceeded to give us our meal with the coffee. I'm not retelling this because we got upset or anything like that. It's just coffee. We don't mind drinking them a little cold. I just found it funny the girl went through the same situation as I earlier with the washing machine. The Japanese seem to have a tendency to nod and go along with what you are saying, even if they don't understand what you're saying. This is just an educated guess, because it happened more than once to us. I can relate though. It's awkward when the other person talks and talks, only for you to end up replying with a dumb, eh? Or a humble, can you repeat that? I didn't understand a word you just said. So instead, you try to guess and hope you are not wrong. There was a little shop next to the restaurant, so while the rest of my family finished eating, I went to take a look. I ended up making an impulse purchase and bought the Shima Enaga egg toy. Apparently, if I put the egg in water, it will crack and the baby bird will emerge, which will then grow into an adult. The whole process can take up to 10 days, but since it's so hot, it might take less than that. Maybe 7 days or so. We will see. I haven't done one of these since I was a child. After lunch, we didn't have much time left, and it started raining more heavily. Sadly, this means I don't have much footage to show you. We were running from one spot to another, trying to keep as dry as possible. Let me see what I have for you. I found the inside of this building, Dr. Kondo's clinic, quite lovely. It has an antique apothecary vibe for sure. The building consists of two structures, both taken from Furubira Shiribeshi district. The clinic itself, made from wood, built in 1919, and the touchstone storage house, which was the doctor's personal library. Both of these were in use until 1958. You can also find this room in Golden Kamuy, inside Edogai's house. Edogai being a taxidermist who has a very unusual hobby. Let's leave it at that. It might be based on Ed Gein, Norman Bates, or both. And there is the room where Yanaga recovers after the Sapporo's hotel explosion. This bed looks harder than finding a job in the current market. By the way, speaking of Edogai, this is the room where Tsukishima was, ready to snipe him should negotiations fail and Tsurumi find himself in danger. It's the residence of the station master, the one we saw earlier. The Sanmazu Kawamoto buckwheat noodle shop was built around 1909 and used to be located in Otaru. If you wanted to eat some noodles, you would be directed to the second floor, where your meal would be served to you. The second floor was also used for parties. Right before he is captured by Tsurumi's men, Sugimoto goes to this restaurant to eat Nishin soba. This event occurs early on in the manga, when Azirpa and Sugimoto are in Otaru. As we made our way up the street, we came across several vans and the film crew packing away their equipment. I couldn't help but wonder if we had just crossed paths with the people filming the second Golden Kamuy movie. After all, there are some rumors that filming began at the end of 2024. I thought about asking, but didn't want to bother them, so I let it go. Besides, I don't know if they can even disclose that sort of thing, and I would hate to put someone in a thought spot. But now I will be left forever wondering. Then again, what are the odds, right? Anyway, after this incident, we arrived at the farm village section of the museum, and at the entrance there was this tower, which is very similar to the one Ogata, our favorite sniper, uses as a strategic eye point during a fight between two rival families. This happens during the Baratu bodyguards of VA, the same one as that barbershop scene. Then we got to visit another of the buildings I was looking forward to the most, the Aosekan Silkworm House. The Silkworm House was built in 95 in Uraozu, Kobato County. This is where silkworms were raised and their eggs collected to be sold to sericulturists, who would go on to produce raw silk. There are two ways to raise silkworms, on shelves or on flat surfaces. Most farmers used shelves. They would feed the silkworms blueberry leaves and clean their cages daily, removing plant debris and excrements. The silkworms were cared for for 30 days, after which they would begin to make their cocoons. Initially, mulberry leaves were picked from wild mulberries that grew in the mountains and fields. But as sericulture became more popular, people began to cultivate superior varieties. The best mulberry leaves were thick and round in shape. The leaves were picked, laid on straw mats in storage rooms, and covered with wet cloths to prevent them from wilting. When it was time to use them to feed the silkworms, they were placed on a cutting board in layers of 4 or 5 and cut into strips. After 7 days, the cocoons were ready to be selected, because at around day 10, that's when the pupae hatch and become moths. The ones that met the specific quality criteria were called seed cocoons, and these were the ones that would be sold to silkworm farmers for commercial silk production. Separating the males from the females was also necessary, and for that there was a specific instrument that was used. This one. This instrument, along with the silkworm farm as a whole, appear in the 4th season of Golden Kamuy, in an episode called Cocoon, in which the tattooed criminal Waishiro Sekiya captures Iji Kata. To save him, Kadokura agrees to play Sekiya's game. Sekiya is an expert in poisons, and it's obsessed with luck. So he poisons some of the cocoons on the device, spins it, and challenges Kadokura to pick one. If Kadokura chooses correctly, Sekiya will then eat the cocoon opposite to the one he chose, thus poisoning himself. Anyway, back to the process of raising silkworms. After hatching, the moths were allowed to mate, and then 28 would be placed on a frame set, a frame placed over the cardboard, to lay eggs. Meanwhile, the selected cocoons were boiled in an iron pot, their ends collected in a drawstring and spun into thread using a reeling machine. The reeling machine was invented in the Joshu region, now Gunma Prefecture, towards the end of the Edo period. Before then, a simple reel called an ushikubi was used, and the thread was twisted and wound by hand in a process known as end spinning. During the Meiji era, Western silk reeling techniques were introduced to Japan, and Tate Saburo invented a foot-operated silk reeling machine that was used in homes across the country. I translated all of this from Japanese, by the way, so I hope I did a good enough job. The reason why I found all of this particularly interesting is because I used it to raise silkworms when I was a child, about 8 or 9 years old, if memory serves me right. It was not for silk production, they were just pets. For creatures so small, they take a lot of work. There was a single mulberry tree in town, and we had to collect its leaves on a regular basis. So, needless to say, we grew out of it rather quickly, but it was still a valuable experience nonetheless. The last building we visited before heading back was the Ogawa family dairy barn. The dairy barn was built in the 1920s by Sansaka Ogawa, which used plants from the USA in its design. That is why the barn has this balloon structure, developed in the US in the 19th century. Hokkaido's livestock farming began with the raising of beef cattle for foreign ships, following the opening of Hakodate port. Then, in the Meiji era, the Hokkaido Development Commission conducted breeding tests on imported cattle at the Third Palace Garden in Tokyo. After that, livestock farming was officially introduced to Hokkaido. From 1873 to 1875, government-run ranches and testing stations produced the first butter. From the beginning, the main goal was to produce raw milk, and the surplus milk was the one used to make the other dairy products. But then, as the number of dairy cows increased from the mid-Meiji period onwards, processed products such as butter, cheese, and condensed milk became more popular, leading to where we are today. When we left the barn, we had to retrace our steps because the mountain village was sealed off to the public. The Urakawa church and the second floor of the Hirose photo studio were also closed, which is a shame because they are also very popular Golden Kamuy sites. But I got to see a lot, and I love the village. Out of all the places in Hokkaido that we visited, this was one of my favorites for sure. My mom actually had to remind me that the shop was going to close soon to get me to hurry up. It was very effective. It made me run towards the exit at light speed. You see, there are a lot of places that sell Golden Kamuy merch, but the historical village has one of the biggest selection of items. So, because I forced, I mean, convinced my parents to watch Golden Kamuy, they wanted to get something too. My mom's favorite character is a Zirpa, so she got a bunch of small pieces featuring her. She also got an Azirpa Q pie, and my brother, even though he didn't watch Golden Kamuy, got a Tsurumi one. My father got these cookie bags based on the characters' clothing, namely Azirpas and Sugimoto's. I wanted something a bit more original, so I went for this Retar's oven glove instead. It's now one of my favorite pieces of merchandise. If there is one thing I love, it's merch I can use. I also bought these two exclusive Golden Kamuy themed books about Ainu culture, one bigger and one smaller, both in Japanese. When the employee saw me coming with these two books, he looked at the bigger one, looked at me, and asked if I was sure that I wanted to buy it, because, in his words, it is quite hard. You see, the books were still in plastic, so you couldn't look inside to see their contents, so I do appreciate his concern. He was absolutely right, by the way. I cannot read any of it. But I didn't buy them under the impression that I could. I'm happy just to have them. Besides, I can read them yet. The key word being yet. Give me a few years, and it might be a different story. And regardless, it's good to have goals. These are going straight to the pile of books I can't read yet. Yes, I actually do have such a pile. I have another Japanese book in that pile, Tokyo from my balcony. The cool thing about this one is that it's written in both Portuguese and Japanese, so it will definitely be the first book I pick up once I move from manga to books, which will take a while. In that pile, I also have books in German. Do I know German? No, not yet, but I will eventually. The reason why I'm not learning German yet is because I want to reach a somewhat intermediate level in Japanese first. You don't want to opt between languages too much, but you also don't want to get stuck in one language forever just because you can reach perfection. Besides, there's learning the language and then there's maintenance. So you have to keep that in mind too. Like here, let me show you. I'm currently reading the 3 books. One on Nordic mythology, which I've almost finished, one containing Luso-Brazilian Gothic tiles, and The Handmaid's Tale, which I recently found in a supermarket in Spain. The first two are in Portuguese, and The Handmaid's Tale is in Spanish. This is the book I'm going to read after I've finished these 3. Le Procès de Marie Antoinette, which, as you can see, is in French. The more languages you add to this, the more juggling you have to do. Of course, I'm doing this for fun. I don't care if I'm not being optimal, but you still want to have some method to it. Anyway, I'm getting off track. Let's proceed with the video. That was just an aside. Sapporo Beer Museum. It was the first time since arriving in Hokkaido that we got to see people. Like, actual crowds, I mean. There were lots of people in the museum, and I couldn't help but think how much worse it must be in the ice season. So yeah, not the best place to go to if you want to avoid crowds. It's probably obvious to you by now, but of course the Sapporo Beer Museum appears in the Golden Kamuy manga. To be more precise, right before the battle in Goryokaku Park. In the Town of Reunions arc, fights occur between beer barrels, a fire engulfs the brewery, and there is a chase scene involving a car shaped as a beer bottle. The Sapporo Beer Museum is located in the Sapporo Garden Park and is registered as a Hokkaido Heritage Site since 2004. The history of the Sapporo Beer Museum dates back to Meiji period, when William Smith Clark visited Hokkaido to help them start beer production. The Hokkaido Kaitaku, which was the former government of Hokkaido, established multiple breweries in Sapporo alone. Until the Kaitakushi brand was closed down in 1882, the business grew into over 30 breweries. Construction of the first brewery began in June of 1876, in the place where now the Sapporo factory is located. The brewery was a two-story wooden building with 860 square meters of floor space. The responsible for the construction? Official Mura-ashi Izanari, a former warrior that fought in the Akodate battle for the new government and against Ijikate's troops. We talked about the Akodate battle in the last video, as you might remember. Mura-ashi Izanari hired an engineer called Seibei Nakagawa, who had studied brewing techniques in Germany. Seibei Nakagawa was a very determined and brave man. He left home at the age of 16 to pursue adventure, and after becoming infatuated with the idea of Europe, he illegally embarked on a ship bound to England as a stowaway, which was a crime punishable by death. After living in poverty in England for 7 years, Nakagawa set out on a journey to Germany, where he met Suzu Aoki, who would later become Japan's foreign minister. With the help of Aoki, Nakagawa landed a job at the Berlin Beer Brewery in Furstenwald in 1873, becoming the first Japanese beer brewer. He even received a prestigious certification recognizing his mastery of the craft. With his certification in hand, Nakagawa returned to Japan after 10 long years abroad and was immediately picked as the chief technical officer of the planned Sapporo brewery. The Kaitakushi Beer Brewery was completed in September of 1876. During the inauguration event, beer barrels were piled up in front of the building. Painted on the barrels in white ink were the words "Ceremony, combining barley and hops yields a spirit called beer." These barrels can now be found in front of the museum. This marked the beginning of beer production in Hokkaido. This cold brewed beer was named Sapporo Beer and went on sale in Tokyo in September of 1877. Featured on the label was the Kaitakushi logo, the North Star, which all of you will probably recognize. Cold brewing is a German technique for fermenting and aging beer at low temperatures. The cold brewed beer has the disadvantage that it is more difficult to preserve than, for example, pasteurized beer, which came later. Kuroda, the director of the new Hokkaido administrative government, wanted the beer to be produced only from locally grown barley and hops. And for this goal, a lot of collaborative agreements with farms were made, agreements that remain alive till this day. Still, this was not easy to achieve. The Japanese really struggled to find a strain of barley that suited the Hokkaido climate, and for several years, the hop seedlings planted would dry out and die. It was not until 1881 that the Kaitakushi Beer Brewery was able to source all of the hops it needed locally. In March 1882, the administrative government was abolished and the Kaitakushi Beer Brewery came under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Agriculture and Commerce. It was thus renamed Sapporo Beer Brewery. This is the story of the Sapporo Beer Brewery. But what about the museum? You see, William Smith Clark had another goal in mind besides getting beer production going in Japan. He also wanted to introduce beet farming in Hokkaido. After all, he was president of the Massachusetts Agricultural College, which had one of the best beet production techniques in the United States at the time. And so, after Clark went back to the United States, the government began beet production in Nanai Village. In 1878, the government delegated beet cultivation to the Sapporo Agricultural College, the predecessor of the Hokkaido University. We talked about the Hokkaido University earlier in this video. A beet sugar factory was established around 1890, but it was not successful for long. Following the popularization of Taiwanese sugar after the First Sino-Japanese War, demand for Japanese beet sugar declined, resulting in the liquidation of the Sapporo Sugar Company's factory. In 1903, the Sapporo Beer Company purchased the factory and remodeled it to use as a brewery. Eventually, the building was renovated again, after which it was converted into the Sapporo Beer Museum, as we know it today. In other words, the Sapporo Beer Museum was originally a sugar factory. It had nothing to do with beer at all. But this was just a side note, a little sugary treat, if you will. So let's dive back into the story of beer. Although Kaitaku Sapporo beer was the first brand on the market, others soon started to emerge. By the late 1890s, there were four major brands in fierce competition: Sapporo beer, Nippon or Iebisu beer, Kirin beer, and Asahi or Osaka beer. The Iebisu beer was particularly popular because of its high quality. The company responsible for its creation, Nippon Beer Joso, was founded in 1887. 2 years after it came into existence, the Iebisu Beer Brewery was built in what is now Mita. All of the beer brewing equipment was purchased from Germany, and they also hired German brewing engineers to help with the beer production. In February of 1890, Iebisu beer went on sale. In August 1899, the Iebisu beer opened in Ginza, so that customers could enjoy draft beer shipped directly from the brewery. It was Japan's first beer hall. Due to its birthplace, Sapporo beer soon found itself struggling to keep up with the competition. At an extraordinary meeting of shareholders in June 1899, it was proposed that the company build a brewery in Tokyo. The motion was approved. In September of 1903, the Tokyo brewery was completed along the banks of the Sumida River, and Sapporo beer began shipping its merchandise. By 1905, Sapporo beer was once again at the top of the market. The most affected by this was the Ebisu beer, which had enjoyed major support in the Kanto region. The president of Nippon Beer Joso, Kyohei Makoshi, saw no other choice but to join forces with the competition. And so, Ebisu beer, Sapporo beer, and Osaka beer, which was also struggling, became one under the new Dainippon Beer Company, which now controlled 70% of the beer market. But because they held so much power, they were forced by law to split up in 1949 into Nippon Beer and Asahi Beer. Nippon Beer inherited the Sapporo and Iebisu brands. The name change taught it the company like a hedge. Consumers were not familiar with it, so they wouldn't buy the beer. So even though beer consumption was growing by the year, Nippon Beer struggled to gain acceptance. Up until, on March of 1956, a Hokkaido exclusive Sapporo beer went on sale in its native hometown. It was so successful that they decided to roll out a nationwide release in January of the next year. Ultimately, they decided that the best move was to go back to naming the whole thing Sapporo Beer. Sapporo Beer, having changed its name, brought the Iebisu beer brand, which had been a pre-war favorite, back on the market in December of 1971. This marked the first time in 28 years that Iebisu was back on the market. The slogan was Iebisu Beer, a delicacy reborn. This is interesting because you can see how a simple name change can make or break your business. They started out as Sapporo and Iebisu and eventually had to go back to those names because those were the names people wanted. It is also important to point out that the use of trademarks was prohibited during World War II. It was only after the ban was lifted that the beer industry was able to start advertising again. Sapporo's beer post-war advertising history began in 1950 with an advertisement for Nippon Beer. Inside the museum, you can see the posters and advertisements that Sapporo Beer has used over the years. They are particularly fascinating if you are into design, marketing, or fashion. At the end of the exhibition, in the Star Hall, there is a paid tasting corner. Here you can sample freshly brewed beer shipped directly from the Hokkaido breweries. You can choose between the Hokkaido exclusive Sapporo Classic, the Sapporo Draft Beer Kuro label, and the Kaitaku beer. But bear in mind that the queues are long. My family and I, we decided that we were too tired to wait after having spent the day walking around, so we left the museum and started our journey back to Otaru. Remember that Otaru is still around 2 hours away from Sapporo. Besides, this was not our first time visiting a museum of this kind. On our first trip to Japan, we went to the Gekkeikan Sake Okura Museum in Kyoto. At least 8 years ago, it was a very peaceful sight. There were no crowds and no waiting times, and there was also a tasting corner with 3 types of sake available. The only problem was that I was not allowed to drink back then. I had reached legal age in my country, but not in Japan. And I actually waited until I was 18 to drink alcohol. I might have been the one of the few people on earth to follow the rules in that regard. Having that taken away from me again wasn't a good experience. And yeah, I only drink twice a year at most, but that's beside the point. Because it's not every day you get to go to a sake brewery and taste fresh sake. And you might think I would want to get my revenge this time on the beer museum, but I don't like beer, so I wasn't that interested. Not enough to wait in the line at least. I like my drinks very clean, mellow, neutral, think dry mead or vodka, not beer, wine, or liquors. But I don't drink vodka anymore, since it's too hard on the stomach, so that leaves us dry meat, which is a bit hard to find around here. It's not something you can just pick up in the supermarket. I think I like sake too, but I don't have much experience with it. Perhaps I should try to find some good sake. We bought some bottles in Japan when we went there the first time, but my mom was reluctant to open them and they went bad. So don't wait for the perfect occasion to open that special bottle you got from overseas. Just a piece of advice. Anyway, we arrived back in Otaru and stopped at a konbini to pick up dinner. I bought some tuna onigiri and we had some sweets left over from the day before for dessert. Then we went to sleep. The following day, we continued heading north towards Asaikawa. But that I will leave for the next video because this one is so long way now. I don't even know if I should say I'm sorry or you're welcome. I guess I'm sorry to my future self who will have to edit all of this, and you're welcome to you. Covering just Otaru would have made the video too short, so I didn't have much of a choice. In any case, I hope you liked it, and see you next time.